On today's show, part one of our Houston Rockets quarter season check-in, the Kevin Durant experience so far, and how Alperen Sengun has leveled up once again. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What is up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, the #1 sports podcast network. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcast or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. On today's show, this is part one of our two-part quarter season roundtable check-in for your Houston Rockets. We're going to be focused on the Kevin Durant experience so far this season for the Rockets, what it's been like having KD wearing a Rockets jersey, how he's elevated this team with his superstar level play, as well as Alperen Sengun leveling up his play once again, and how he's elevated himself to an all-NBA caliber player this season. First, want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. And now for your Houston Rockets quarter season roundtable check-in are all three of your weekly Locked On Rockets co-hosts. We've got NBA draft enthusiast and diehard Houston Rockets fan Madison Moore. We've got host of the B Block podcast and Sports Radio 610's Brandon Scott. And then, of course, the podfather himself, Rockets Wire editor and host of the Rockets Launch Pod, Ben DuBose. You can track them all down on social media, all across the different social media universes, all that good stuff. Gentlemen, so happy to have everybody here for a quarter season check-in on how the Houston Rockets are doing at this stage of the season. I know they're coming off a not so great loss, call it a schedule loss if we want to, against the Dallas Mavericks, but this Rockets team still a pretty strong start to the year, one of the best starts in franchise history, sitting at 15-6 to start this campaign. The Kevin Durant era fully underway at this point. And that's as good a place to start as any, as we're going to dive into so many different topics across this part one and part two quarter season check-in. We'll talk about Kevin Durant and kind of what that experience has been like with him in a Rockets jersey so far. We'll talk about Alperen Sengun leveling up once again, an all-NBA, arguably MVP caliber leap from Alperen Sengun this season. We'll get into some of the debate around the Rockets point guard woes with Thompson and the experiment with him on ball, Reed Sheppard, his growth, and the Rockets trying to acclimate him, getting him, brought along slowly. Going to get into so many different areas, and we may go down some rabbit holes and have some fun. But let's start with the Kevin Durant stuff, guys. Madison, I want to lob it up to you first. Kind of your thoughts on just how the start of this Kevin Durant era has gone, the Kevin Durant experience so far as a member of the Houston Rockets.
I think it's gone amazing so far. I mean, Kevin Durant is, in the twilight of his career and has not lost a step at all. I think his offensive prowess has been very effective in the early going. I think that as a Rockets fan and a fan of the sport, it's great getting up and watching Kevin Durant play every single night, but also understanding what the nitty-gritty weaknesses and strengths of his game, and also seeing that Kevin Durant is also still growing and developing as a player, even at this later stage in his career, which is a testament to his work ethic and his ability to adapt to different situations. And when I say that, I mean the playmaking, right? The ability to evolve over the course of games, to make plays for other guys. Now, there have been some up and down moments, and I think this is an area of his game that he's still growing with, but the willingness to be able to do that every night. And you can see Ime's imprint. Ime did this with a lot of young stars with getting their playmaking going. And I think he's having an impact on Kevin Durant's game in that area too. But everything else is as advertised. This guy is uber efficient. He's a tough shot maker, and he's been the leader of this team, the leader of this offense. And so far, I think Rockets fans have to be pretty happy with where they are with Kevin Durant right now.
Yeah, I would add to that just that the willingness. I love how Madison pointed out the willingness. I think it's easy if you just know Kevin Durant by name or have only watched him in some of the more highlight moments, maybe you're not a league pass guy and haven't been watching Kevin Durant night in and night out for the last 18, 19 years or whatever it's been, then maybe you don't know some of the nuances of his game. But the part that has surprised me, or at least that I don't know if surprise is even the right word, but something that stood out to me is the willingness to make the extra pass and to make his teammates better. One thing that I feel like is getting better over time is, and he talked about this, y'all will remember from the media day, the preseason media day, when everybody got up there and spoke, he mentioned, and I think we talked about it at the time, how learning how to play together, and I'm saying specifically the Rockets learning how to play with Kevin Durant as opposed to Kevin Durant learning how to play with anybody, but them all learning how to play together was going to be a bit of an experiment. It was going to take a little bit of time. And I feel like we're starting to see some progress with there with that. You know, I've heard people talk about wanting to see more two-man game with Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun. Maybe it's you, Jackson, who's mentioned this. Like, it's really good when they do it, but they don't do enough of it. We'll see how much more of it they do when Sengun comes back from his illness. But even in his absence, these last couple of games, and I'm really thinking specifically about the Phoenix game from a couple of nights ago, where you saw Kevin Durant and Sheppard playing well off of each other, right? And that just comes from time and experience, the faith that Kevin Durant, that's another thing. The battery in the back of the young players that Kevin Durant has put there has been really refreshing. And so, like Madison mentioned, Kevin Durant has been as advertised. His impact on his teammates, on the rest of the guys, is the part that maybe would have been a little bit more of a subtle development, but something that I feel like we're seeing right now.
Yeah, and to the point on his passing, he had back-to-back games with 8 assists this week, including one against the Kings with 8 assists to no turnovers, the first time he had done that since February of 2019. So the playmaking is coming around, and now you look at his overall season numbers, he's right at 25 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists per game on almost 50-40-90 shooting splits. He's above 50% overall, just below 40% and just below 90% from the line, 40% on threes, true shooting at 62% on the nose. And for me, in the macro of this Rockets season, it's not that there were any reasons to doubt Kevin Durant other than the obvious. At 37 years old, how much time does he have left at an elite level? And when you look at big picture, how could this Rockets season fall short of expectations? The easiest way, aside from injuries, would be this being the year that Kevin Durant finally falls off a little bit, because Father Time stops for no one. But 20 games into the season, I feel pretty confident with those numbers, we can conclusively say he's still that guy. He's still Kevin Durant. And if you combine that with the formula from a year ago, I know the pieces have changed. There's no Fred and Dylan, but Ime Udoka has fixed the defense. They're now number 2 in the league in defensive rating. So they have that defensive identity from a year ago. They still have that grit. They still play like an Ime Udoka team. But now, instead of Jalen Green as your tip of the spear scorer, you have Kevin Durant, basically the same guy that he's been the last few years in Brooklyn and Phoenix. And in the big picture, the Rockets were never going to be a favorite entering this season because the Oklahoma City Thunder exist. But what you wanted was to get to the playoffs with a chance. This team is good enough with the defense and with the high-end talent like KD and Alperen Sengun. Just get to the playoffs, and this team has the talent. They're not going to be the favorite, but to at least give yourself an opportunity to compete against the best of the best, and maybe you can beat them 4 times out of 7. Well, the easiest way for that formula to fall short, other than the obvious of injuries, would be if KD isn't KD anymore. And I think we're now at the quarter point of the season, and the numbers I just read off, he's still KD, and that's going to give you a chance. And in the big picture, I think that's the most important storyline of the Rockets season, making sure that Kevin Durant is still Kevin Durant, because if he is, yeah, you're going to have a chance next spring.
Coming up, we're going to keep the Kevin Durant conversation moving along. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Mint Mobile. There's no reason to let big wireless drain your wallet, especially during the holidays. Right now, Mint Mobile is running their best deal of the year. All their unlimited plans are 50% off. That means you can lock in 3, 6, or even 12 months of unlimited premium wireless for just $15 a month. It's the easiest way to take your overpriced phone bill and give it the full Scrooge treatment. And what makes it even better is how simple Mint makes the switch. No contracts, no nonsense, just real savings and real quality service. Switching to Mint lets you keep the same coverage for a lower price. Setup only takes a few minutes. You can bring your own phone and number without any issues. The service is fast, super reliable, even on the go. Turn your expensive wireless present into a huge wireless savings future by switching to Mint. Shop Mint Unlimited plans at mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnba. Limited time offer, upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required, $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees, initial plan term only. Greater than 35 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See Mint Mobile for details. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. The comments help us out a ton, guys. Thank you so much for the most recent episodes where you guys have been commenting way more. I promise it helps the videos so much. Let's go ahead and dive back into our roundtable discussion focused on Kevin Durant and then some more Alperen Sengun stuff coming up. You know, some absolutely fantastic points brought up about KD. And I keep going back to one thing that got said in the offseason. I think it was back when the Rockets were doing an event somewhere around 9/11 Patriots Day or something to that effect. And Ime mentioned that one of the early conversations that he had with Kevin, you know, before he really started integrating himself and practicing with his teammates and before they kind of underwent training camp and all that, was that Kevin was very vocal about not wanting to like come here and be the guy. Like he wanted to come here and empower these younger players to grow their games. And I think we're seeing that, right, with Kevin Durant posting a career low usage rate. And essentially, you know, there's a lot of points where, and much to the chagrin of some KD stands out there, shout out to all y'all who are listening to this, but there's like, sometimes there's like an uproar with KD fans where it's like, he's not touching the ball enough and he's not taking over the game and the young guys are looking him off. And it's like, if Kevin wanted the ball, Kevin would be getting the ball whenever he wants the ball because it's Kevin freaking Durant. Like he would, if he was upset about his touches or lack of involvement in the offense. Now there's still moments, right, where one of the young guys has like a moment of youthful exuberance, right, where they do make a mistake in transition or they get a little too tunnel vision for their own good. I'm not saying that those moments don't happen, but I do think it's simply by design, right? If the Rockets wanted to win at the highest level right now, everything would be funneled through Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun every single possession, right? Because those are the two star players. But what you're seeing is, I think, Ime Udoka and company taking a more holistic approach to the offense, wanting to find ways to grow and develop all the different weapons. That way, you're not just a one trick or maybe a two trick pony with Sengun and KD and that two-man game, right? And running the offense through those guys. And so you do have games where you get these like vintage kind of KD games, like the Suns game the other night, right? Where he just absolutely takes over, right? 17 points in the second quarter, 3 dimes, completely turned that game on its head. And he's still very much capable of those superstar level efforts where he can almost single-handedly win you a game, or some of the ridiculous buckets at the end of the overtime game against Orlando, right? To force OT and then to win the game in OT. All the stuff that he's capable of, to Ben's point about being the tip of the spear now for this Rockets team. But he's also been very unselfish, to y'all's point about just facilitating, sharing the basketball with other guys. And that's one thing that I wasn't really expecting out of KD. And it's happened kind of by necessity with the way that this team is structured, with the loss of Fred VanVleet, you know, right before the season started. And so by necessity, KD's had to be more of a playmaker this season rather than just being the finishing act on a possession. He has to be the one initiating these possessions and starting at the top. And some of the Rockets' best actions are with him and Alperen Sengun in their two-man game, you know, starting a possession.
And you can see him on the court guiding the young players, specifically Reed Sheppard and Jabari Smith Jr., who I think are clearly better this season relative to last season. And I think, you know, the biggest thing with KD is making sure that athletically he's still the same guy, that he can still get to his spots, make the shots, that Father Time at 37 isn't going to take away his gifts. I still contend that's most important. But what's second most important is seeing how comfortable he is and the value of his leadership around the young guys. So when you get beyond just, you know, the upgrade of Kevin Durant as a scorer, a far more consistent 3-level version of Jalen Green from last season's formula, but you also get the wisdom of nearly 3 decades in the NBA and what that means for the younger guys like Reed Sheppard, like Jabari Smith.
Well, nearly 3 decades. He's not been in the NBA that long.
No,
man.
he's about to enter his 3rd decade is what I meant.
I mean, fair. Nearly 3 years. You're aging him.
He's almost
wow.
in his 2nd decade. When he's here in 2 years, and he will be, that will be his 3rd decade in the NBA. He is one of the longest tenured players. And a guy with that much experience and wisdom to to mold younger guys, it's just so valuable. And I think it speaks to this is truly where he wants to be, not just on the court, but off. When we see him around the team at practices and the locker room, he's so comfortable here. This was where he wanted to be. Obviously, he has ties to Texas. And I think when he is that comfortable in a given spot in the NBA, that's when you get the best version of Kevin Durant, not just in terms of the 25 points per game, which he can do in his sleep, but also what he does for the younger players and building them up and moving them forward in their careers. And that's what's been really fulfilling, is that beyond just what Kevin does individually at 37 years old, but what he means for those younger players who are getting better. And, it's a combination of the two. You're right, Jackson, in that it's not just what he does off the court, but on the court. Yeah, there's possessions where the most efficient shot would probably be KD getting to the mid-range, but he's letting Reed or Jabari do it because in the long run, it's probably best for the team to reach its collective potential. And so to me, that's the essence of Kevin Durant. To this point, it's been a home run acquisition, not just on the court, but off, and not just because of what he does individually, but how he fits in the collective.
I just want to point out that Ben was the one who aged Jeff Green at Media Day too, and Jeff had to hit him with the God damn, so.
Anyway, I undersold. No, if you remember, I undersold KD. I said you're 18, and KD corrected me. No, it's you're 19.
Oh, that's right.
You're 18, but technically it's 19. It's just the Achilles year. It wouldn't seem like it counts, but it actually does. So.
And just to point out, like Jackson was saying, I think this is all about design. I think the Rockets have to do this incredible job of juggling their young talent, the growth of the young players, but also competing for a championship, also maintaining the health and load management of Kevin Durant as well. And I think that the nexus of that in and of itself is where I think the Rockets are truly succeeding. Kevin Durant doesn't have to have a ton of usage, but he still is growing in different sets, like the pick and roll, right? But also you want to give a little bit more leash to the Reed Sheppards, the Ben Thompsons, Jabari Smith Jr.'s of the world to continue to grow their game for us to get a peek into what they have. Because when playoffs come, I think the ball will be in just Kevin Durant's and Alperen Sengun's hands as the primary initiators. But it's so important for us to get some of the stuff that the Rockets have been gathering over the past 5-6 years during this rebuild. We are still developing young players. These guys have not hit their prime. They're still scratching the surface of who they want to be. And it's a testament to not just Kevin Durant, but also Ime Udoka in this balancing act that they're performing, where we're able to see these bright spots in Reed Sheppard, these different ways to deploy Thompson, while also still getting Kevin Durant to average 25 points a game and grow with these young players. And I know we'll get into it later, but Alperen Sengun as well as a part of the fulcrum in this offense. There's a lot of things going on with this Rockets team, a lot of different storylines, a lot of different things that really are question marks, but we're seeing being answered in a real way. And I think that's a testament to not just Kevin Durant coming in and being able to lead these guys, be open about it and encourage them in that leadership, but also Ime Udoka and the coaching staff.
Hey, real quick, just for the Kevin Durant stands, the KD stands that are listening, like we mentioned this, it being by design. This is by design. Like Kevin Durant was asked about this after the Phoenix game on Friday night about, hey, because obviously it scored his 31,000 points on his career, only 8 players in the history of the game to do that. But they're asking him about, getting the other guys involved and just the importance of that. And Kevin Durant just straight up said, hey, look, I could probably go down and shoot the ball 20 times in a row and nobody would complain. But when you're trying to build a team, when you're trying to build that chemistry, trying to build that camaraderie, trying to build a certain level of trust, like to Madison saying, and I think we all agree that Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun, by and large, are going to have the ball in their hands, but they want to be able to rely on more than that, right? That would be, and we might get into some of the disappointing parts of the season, but that would be super disappointing if you got this far in the season or further into the season and all they got is Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun and everything relies on that. Like that's what they want primarily, but they also want to be able to rely on Reed Sheppard to have the ball in critical moments and Ben Thompson to be able to initiate the offense. These are the things that they're working on while they're winning games in real time.
One of those bigger adjustments, right? That Kevin Durant talked about,
everybody adjusting to kind of playing with him, to Brandon's point from earlier, right, is, with the exception of maybe like, I guess, Fred, who's not playing right now, and I don't know, Steve-O, who's played with some superstar level players. He's obviously played with KD himself,
including Durant,
yeah. But like it's a new experience for everybody on the roster. This is the greatest player that Alperen Sengun's ever played with in his career, right? And so that's a massive adjustment to go from, even a massive adjustment for Alperen Sengun himself to go from being the number one guy for these past couple seasons for the Rockets, the head of the snake, the offense is running through him, all that stuff, to suddenly, oh man, there's another guy to take all that pressure off me, right? And then figuring out how you're able to, or how to adjust your game, how you're better able to attack opposing defenses, where your spots are going to be coming from now that you have another reliable co-star out there who is taking all that pressure off of you. And I think that's been kind of an underrated part of this season, that you have like this OKC team that is this juggernaut, but they're cohesive because they played together for years, right? They know each other, they know their tendencies, they have their established identity and their rotations and all that. This Rockets team is cobbling it together on the fly, and they're doing it while simultaneously overcoming a ton of injuries, right? They had to overcome they're having to overcome the Fred injury all season long, but DFS still hasn't shown up. They've been missing Tari, Eason. Steve-O's not playing back-to-backs. Katie's missed a couple games. Now Sengun's missed a couple games. Like, the fact that this team is sitting as high in the standings as they are, despite all the adversity that's kind of been thrown their way to start this season, is, I think, a testament to just how good they are and how dominant this team would have been if they would have just been healthy on paper. Coming up, we shift the conversation over to Alperen Sengun and how he's leveled up his play once again. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is so clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging great seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts with great seats, open up and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. You pull up the app and the layout makes it so simple to scroll through matchups and compare different seat views, pick a game, tap a section, have your tickets locked in within minutes. No confusion, no hunting for the fine print. So take the guesswork out of buying your World Cup tickets for every match, concert, and event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Game Time. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Let's go ahead and dive back into our roundtable conversation where we're switching gears to Alperen Sengun. We talked about, what it would look like for him to potentially level up again in the offseason, right? And we saw him doing that as early as Eurobasket, right? The insane run that he went on with the Turkish national team, finishing second in Eurobasket. And he looked like an even better version of himself somehow, surprisingly, an even better version of himself in Eurobasket, and carried that Eurobasket momentum into this regular season where he's been playing at an all-NBA caliber level, arguably an MVP caliber level. You look at some of the MVP polls and stuff, and Alperen Sengun's been top 10 on all those metrics. You go look at some of the advanced metrics out there. He's crushing all of them. The Rockets offense is just carving through opposing defenses when he's available and on the floor. Ben, what have you thought about his kind of the fact that Sengun has found yet another way to level up his game again this season?
Yeah, the assist total going above 7. We talked about before the season. This being
I need it to hit 8. I need it to hit 8. It's not gonna hit 8, but I wanted it to hit 8 so bad.
No, but without Fred VanVleet, without the traditional point guard, this is where you can lean more into Shin Hub, and they've done that, and it's working. And the three-point shot, I know it's a relatively small sample and that he's not shooting that many of them, but to this point, he's above 38%. It's viable. We'll see how sustainable that is, but even if it's just the passing, that in and of itself is a big jump from last season. It shows you that at 23 years old, he's still developing. And I mentioned Kevin Durant being probably the biggest storyline for this particular season, what it means for the grand scheme and can they contend. I think for this generation of the Rockets, Alperen Sengun is the biggest storyline in terms of the implications of the first 20 games. Because I think what we've seen is that this year, Alperen Sengun is not just an all-star, he is an all-NBA level player. And why that distinction is relevant, if you're an all-star, you're looking at what, top 30, 35, because some players don't play due to injury or circumstances. Maybe the team is having a down year. But if you're all NBA, you're in the conversation to be one of the 15 best players on the planet. And if you have one of those guys, you are always in the conversation. That's why, the last week or so, there's been discussions with Giannis potentially hitting the trade market. And, what if he wants to come to Houston? Would the Rockets steal Sengun? Well, the pushback beyond just what Sengun is doing now, if you have an all-NBA level player at just 23 years old, you are never far from contention. You are always, worst case, a hot streak or a move or two away from getting back in the conversation, potentially for the next 10 to 12 years. That's why the difference between all-NBA and all-star is so important. To me, when you have an all-NBA level guy, those are the types, when you get into the top 15 players in the league, their success becomes intrinsically tied to team success. They lift you. We talked about when James Harden was here, how he basically gave you a 50-win floor every single season when he was in his prime. I'm not saying Sengun is there just yet, but he's not that far off either. Like, he is getting to those conversations, and at 23 years old, he's just getting better. And that's why, you never say never with a player as good as Giannis. Like, you owe it to yourself to at least have the conversations. But I have a tough time seeing the Rockets do that type of deal, because when you have that level of player at just 23 years old, it's not just about this season. As long as he is on your roster and healthy, a difference maker like that puts you in the conversation every single year for the foreseeable future. And that is just so valuable. And so, to me, I wouldn't say MVP just yet. I mean, he's on the list, but Jokic, SGA, the bar is really, really high to actually get to that, tier that's in real consideration. But to go from all-star to all-NBA, which I do think is fair, that has implications not just for this year, but for a long time moving forward. That as long as the Rockets have Alperen Sengun, they're going to be in the Western Conference conversation, and that always gives you a chance. And that's just so important to Rafael Stone, Ime Udoka, and what they're trying to build. Because I've said it before, I'll say it again. The two words you hear most out of Toyota Center is sustainable contender. They don't want this to just be about the Kevin Durant years. The idea with Kevin Durant is that you open your contending window sooner, but you don't shut it any faster. Well, the reason it's not shut any faster is that guys like Sengun, like Amen, like Reed, like Jabari, they're all on the upswing. And right now, among those four, Sengun is clearly at the top of the list. And so if you have Alperen Sengun, you always have a chance. And I think that's even more so now that you have an all-NBA version of Alperen Sengun.
Yeah, so I totally agree with that, Ben. And I just like to add, some of the things that I've noticed about Alperen Sengun being able to reach this all NBA level, and also maintaining, and I'd even say improving a little bit on his defense, and being able to contain this offensive workload of now being full in effect shin hub, right, while not taking a step back defensively, especially with all the criticism, and some rightly so, in his development, as that being the biggest weakness in his game. And we've seen him time after time make defensive stops, be in the right place. It's almost like I just remember being so frustrated about
it's like we take it for granted now that he's a good defender.
And he doesn't make mistakes, and then he's often making the best play at the end of the game. It started in Eurobasket, right? It started this summer when he made these incredible in clutch moment defensive plays, but then we see it in the Orlando game with huge blocks down the stretch, always on time. And that's something I really want to give him his flowers for, because that was all work ethic. He really worked at that end of the floor for his game, right? Even when it came at a detriment of some of his offense last year. But you see some of that starting to come around now. And with him playing at this all NBA level now, I think you got to start to remember that, guys, he projected to be not a good defender, and he is a very much so a plus defender and a defensive playmaker at the end of games. And so that stuff, when you're building a team, this guy's going to do nothing but get better. You know what I mean? He's still very young. He is not in the prime in his prime yet. He's getting towards that 23, but guys typically don't really enter their prime till 25, 26. So we can expect another, leap or so from Alperen Sengun from the level that he is right now. And just understanding that this guy is a gamer down the stretch of games. The clutch buckets down the stretch. I mean, Kevin Durant was thoroughly shocked in the Oklahoma City game at how many plays Alperen Sengun made down the stretch. I mean, the Orlando game, which I'm sure will come up a lot of times throughout our talks. But
the Milwaukee game.
Yeah, the Milwaukee game. Exactly. This guy is so dependable. At times I almost think he's neck and neck with Kevin Durant on how dependable down the stretch he's been this year, right? And those types of things would win the Rockets games and win teams games, period. And so I just want to give him his flowers on those types of things, because there are regular season performers, and then there's playoff performers. And guys like Draymond Green have kind of talked about this, right? Alperen Sengun is proving every day. And when you have a young player and a young star specifically, one of my biggest questions is this going to translate to the playoffs? Is this guy going to be a playoff? When the lights are the brightest, when the pressure is up, will he be able to perform? And those clutch buckets, those clutch performance defensively over and over again, I think this guy is here to stay as a big time performer at the end of games, even when we get to playoffs. So, I'm really stoked about Alperen Sengun and his development.
And one other thing I would throw in real quickly, I think the fact that he's succeeding with Steven Adams is really important in the big picture as well, because one of the arguments that I used to see against Sengun was that even if he's really good, there's a certain way that you have to build your team around a player of that archetype. And I don't think that's true anymore, because the argument used to be, hey, if Sengun isn't an elite rim protector, yet because he's not a super high volume 3-point guy, it's tough to play him alongside another big. How's it all going to work? Is there a trade-off? Well, you're playing him, maybe not every matchup, but most matchups, Alperen Sengun and Steven Adams are playing together. They might not start, but they're playing together in close to every game, and it's working. So the fact that it wasn't just a flash in the pan, it wasn't just a one-off where they caught lightning in a bottle with the double big late last season, but the fact that it's continuing into this season. Obviously, Sengun and Steven Adams are both good players individually, but the fact that they make it work collectively, I think that's very important in the big picture, because it tells you that Sengun he won't be pigeonholed the way a lot of people feared earlier in his career, as there's a certain way you have to build your team around him. No, if you can play Steven and Sengun together, that's a lot more utility to how you can build your team around Alpi in the years ahead. And I think that type of roster flexibility when you're trying to build a contender in an environment where the Oklahoma City Thunder exist is going to be really important to Rafael Stone. And it's just a small thing, but I think it's an important one that we should note.
Yeah, and look, I'm glad you mentioned the archetype, because I don't think people were wrong in the point that they were making about not being able to build around that archetype. They were wrong about Sengun being said archetype, right? Or at least to Sengun's credit, he's developed enough to where, again, you cannot pigeonhole him. You cannot put him in that box. I'll make this point really quick, because I think it's important. And you guys have hit on this a little bit already, but it's the fact that Sengun seems to be better at the Sengun stuff, all of the stuff that you liked about his game to begin with, on top of the fact, the defense that y'all are talking about, right? The 3-point shooting, Ben, that you mentioned earlier, like those were the weaknesses in his game. Hey, if he can just develop a little bit more of a credible outside shot or a 3-point shot, just be a threat, somebody that you have to guard at the 3-point line. And the defense, right? I don't think we can say enough about the leap that he's made from where he started to where he is now as we sit together today talking about him, right? From 2021 to now, it has been a market leap for him. And it also even gives, this is a little bit of a side note, but it even gives me a little bit of hope for guys that have weaknesses in their game that are really young players. Let's just use Reed Sheppard as an example. It's not an apples to apples comparison. I'm not saying that, but the fact that you can see a guy in his first and second year be a cone or be not very good defensively and then turn into a credible defender, that speaks to player development and the commitment to improving your game, which I think we've seen from Alperen Sengun. And so, yeah, the difference, again, like you're mentioning, Ben, the difference between all-star and all NBA, whenever they had those conversations about the Giannis trade or whenever it comes up, I can't unsee, right? You guys were going over some of the really cool games and some moments. Madison, you were, and I threw in there that Milwaukee game. Look, I can't unsee Alperen Sengun dancing around Giannis and getting to the cup and kind of treating him like a middle schooler a little bit. And I'm being a little bit dramatic there. It's Giannis we're talking about, but that's the way it looked. And so now I'm like, hey, a year ago, if you had done this thought experiment of would you trade Sengun for Giannis? Yeah, I would have seriously considered it and probably would have done it. And now I'm comfortably having a conversation about Sengun at some point being that caliber of player. I'm not saying he's as good as Giannis or is even going to have a career as great as Giannis, but in terms of being that sort of both floor and ceiling raiser, I think he's well on his way headed in that direction.
And just let me add real quick, he also did it to the reigning defensive player of the year, Evan Mobley.
Yes.
Just completely.
Most fraudulent DPOY in history. I can't stand it. I refuse to believe Evan Mobley is actually a DPO. Put Evan Mobley on the floor without Jarrett Allen for a full 82-game season. See if he's actually still a DPOY. I will dig my heels in on this take forever.
Trigger my guy.
But to the point on the Giannis discussions that are inevitably going to pick up in the 2 months leading up to the trade deadline, I think what a lot of people miss when they try and frame this from a Rocket standpoint, it's about percentage odds at a title. That's the way most front offices look at trades of that magnitude, or really any trades. And I don't know what the number is. I'm just going to say, like, if you have an all NBA level player and he stays relatively healthy, like let's say you feel like every year you have a 5 or 10% shot. Well, if that 5 or 10% shot goes out 10 years into the future, you add all of those together and you do the combined math of the chance you'll have at getting at least one title over that span, that's pretty significant to where even if you think Giannis might move the needle a little bit in the next year or two, and I personally think it would more be a year from now, because it's really tough to make a change of that magnitude and immediately win a title, because it's tough to, reconfigure your chemistry, your team on the fly like that. So this season, I don't want to say it's gone, but it'd almost be like a bonus if you did something along those lines. And so people just look at it very short term and say, oh, you've got a really good team now. You can make them even better. Well, yeah, for a couple of years. But then look at, even if it's a little bit lower overall, just the totality of Alperen Sengun's career. We haven't even mentioned the friendly contract that he's on for the next 5 years below $40 million. So in terms of team building, that's really important as well. Hat tip to Rafael Stone. I don't think it's a numbers game, and I don't think people around the league look at it the way they should. When you have a player like Alperen Sengun with no real injury history at 23 years old, he always gives you a chance. And if you do the math, adding up year after year of, at least being in the conversation, giving yourself a chance at a title, then you look at, the totality of it and the end goal is eventually bringing at least one title in this generation to the Rockets, hopefully more than one. Yeah, it's pretty tough for me to see the Rockets parting with Alperen Sengun, just because having him as a foundational piece is so important.
Back to the point that Brandon was making. I know he immediately was like, it's not an apples to apples comparison with Sengun and Reed Sheppard. I will say there are a lot of similarities between like year 1 and 2 Alperen Sengun, with like the quick hands and the ability to like read some plays defensively, because when you're that in tune with how players are thinking about how they're approaching their offensive game and the anticipation of some of the passes and things, like he would get those, he was getting those deflections and little tipaways and stuff as a rookie. And you kind of be like, oh, how did he like sniff that play out? And then you realize it's because he's processing the game at such a fast level, or at such a high level as a young player. And it was just a matter of time for him to actually be able to step up and like execute defensively. And you're seeing some of those moments with Reed Sheppard on the defensive side where he's anticipating things. He's understanding how to recover on a play where he does get beat. And so,
so what you're saying is Reed can read.
Oh, Lord have mercy. How do I get him out? Just remove him from the stage. No, okay. All right. He's back. Okay. No, and I will say with Sengun, right? I think he's just crushed every set of expectations. He continues to find ways to get better. He's learning how to play with a fellow superstar for the first time in his career. And that's been a learning curve, right? For both him and Kevin Durant, right? Because Kevin Durant's never played with a big as talented as Alperen Sengun. So it's a new experience for both of those guys, learning how to play off of one another, figuring out how each one of them is able to bend the opposing defense. And okay, they start loading up on Alpi. So now you go back to more KD, and it's like a pendulum a pendulum swing between the two of them offensively on any given, in any given game, in any given quarter, on any given possession, with how they're kind of figuring things out on the fly, and watching that chemistry build in real time is really exciting. I will say, and I don't even want to say this is nitpicking right now, right? Because it was the shooting. The outside shooting was the biggest weakness for Alperen Sengun's game. First, it was the defense. He addressed it, answered it, figured it out. Now he's a plus level defender. Awesome. The shooting, he's addressed it. Right now, he is a legitimate outside threat, right? And it is a reliable part of his game. And as long as he doesn't fall too in love with that three ball, it's great that he has it as a counter for when defenses truly start sagging off of him. The next step for Alperen Sengun is to stop letting the refs dictate so much of his mentality in a game. He complains so much about officiating, and that'll be his next big step. Is it's understandable when you are a star level player, when you are that caliber of talent, and when you're getting grabbed and held and shoved around, and I mean it's a war zone down there, right? With the bigs battling down in the paint. I wouldn't want to have to do it, and I'm glad I don't have to. So I can only imagine what it's like on a nightly basis for Alperen Sengun dealing with all of that physicality and all that contact. That being said, there's too many moments where he looks for the bailout from the whistle. There's too many moments where he tries to swing through the defense or rip through. And yeah, was there contact and there probably could have or should have been a call? Yes. Man up and play the game. Just play through the and I made these same criticisms of James Harden way back in the day, because there was a point where it felt like James fell too in love with hunting the whistle and not enough of just playing the damn game. And just because the crazy thing is, and you can make this comparison for James and for Alpi, they're both so incredibly talented when they're not just fishing for calls. Just play the game and the calls will follow. Just play the game, play through the contact, do what you are capable of doing as an offensive force, and good things will happen. And I just feel like there's just too many moments where Sengun is a little too, I won't say reliant on the whistles, but just looking for the whistle, right? And I'd rather him just get to his spot, do his thing, and make the defense pay for it.
Do we think that gets better or worse as his cachet sort of increases here? Because I'm not trying to get negative here, but it seems like just
we're not getting negative. We're just getting real, Brandon. This is real. Anybody who watches the Rockets knows that this is Sengun's favorite gesture. I saw Madison was doing it a minute ago too. Just give me the replay. Yeah.
But does it not? The only reason why I bring that point up is because it does feel like, and this is a vibes thing. I don't have a number on how many times he does this. They don't keep those stats, but it does feel like the better he's gotten, the whinier he's gotten about calls. As you become more of a thing, and we spend all this time talking about him. The Sengun thing is a thing now, and so does he? That's what I'm curious about. Does that get better? Does somebody kind of pull him to the side and say, "Hey, man, this isn't cool," or does the more cachet he gets? Does that increase? I'm a little bit worried about that.
So I would say I would be more worried about it if Ime Udoka wasn't our coach, and his coaching style up front, identifying the details, you know what I mean? And this
not
has been a
sugarcoating
model.
anything.
Yeah, not sugarcoating anything. And this has been Ime's model when he got here, is y'all complain too much when they were young players. You know what I mean? And that was something I think he tightened up. And as we can see, Alperen, but also he's getting more usage. He's getting more opportunity. He has more responsibility. And I think a lot of times he falls into the, dang, I have to be better for my team. And he tries to use those plays as an excuse in areas. But I think Ime's, if it gets too much out of hand, Ime's going to pull him to the side. He's going to correct it. And I think their relationship, the way players respect Ime Udoka, I trust him to do it in the right manner. And I trust that Alperen Sengun, that's the European style of things, but he has no ego. You know what I mean? He doesn't seem to me like this egotistical player. And he's always taking criticism well. When people were trying to defend him because they knew he was our best prospect on the team, and people were like, well, but that defense is an issue, and there was wars in the Rockets culture, Alperen Sengun was the one getting on the mic and saying, my defense has to be better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that level of accountability is why I don't worry as much.
If you talk to people inside the building, they will tell you that he is very self-critical and he's very self-aware. And that's so important. He's not just constantly gassing himself up and feeling or putting yes men around him. No, he wants to get better. And when he has a bad game or a low light, he acknowledges it. And the silver lining that I would point out with the officiating critique specifically, I think in crunch time, it has gotten better. I think the low light was actually the Detroit game, where I feel like second game of the year, there were a couple of drives where he went in when they were down a couple of points in the final 2 minutes, and he was specifically hunting the call. And it's like, dude, just go out and get a bucket. Don't worry about, like, instead of trying to make the shot, he was like basically trying to start and stop to where he'd get someone on his back and just, you know, playing for the foul as opposed to just going out and getting a tough bucket. And I think in the high leverage moments since then, you've seen him be much more composed. Milwaukee and Orlando have been brought up a couple of times. I actually thought, by the way, the buzzer beater against the Magic, I understand why they're not going to call it in that situation. I actually think, letter of the law, Jonathan Isaac fouled him. If you go and watch, especially the side view, Isaac makes contact with his lower half. Like, there was some physicality there. And I think that's one of those where if it happened in the first 45 minutes of the game, there's a decent chance that's an and one. And Sengun was thrilled for the buzzer beater. He did not say a word to the officials, even though there was some contact. And Jonathan Isaac's a pretty physical defender. I'm sure he felt it. And so I think as far as the first 45 minutes, it's still a work in progress. But I do think that when it matters most, relative to the start of the year, where I think especially the Detroit game, he was playing way too much for the whistle. I think in the high leverage moments since, he hasn't. And so I think that offers hope that eventually, maybe not every minute of the game, but a little bit more frequently, you'll see him, tuning that stuff out.
That's going to do it for part one of our two-part Houston Rockets quarter season roundtable check-in. Be sure to go follow along our great weekly co-hosts. Go follow Madison, go follow B. Scott, go follow Ben, the Podfather, wherever they produce their content. That's going to do it for this edition. Be on the lookout for part two of this quarter season check-in on the podcast feed. It'll come out a day after this one. But for this one, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.